morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us here this morning at the United States Institute of Peace. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the Institute of Peace Dr. Fuad Hussein, who's Chief of Staff to the President of Iraqi Kurdistan, Masoud Barzani, and Minister Falah Bakir, who is the head of the Department of Foreign Relations of the Kurdistan Regional Government. You have their biographies, so I won't go through those, but we are very pleased to have these two distinguished members of the Kurdish government here with us again, and we're going to welcome them back to the Institute. Also like to welcome Ambassador Falah. Always glad to have you. Other distinguished guests that we have here, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to the Institute. Timely conversation. Don't even have to say that. Timely conversation. The topic of Washington, of the international community, is the topic of today. And so we're very pleased to be able to sponsor this discussion today. The U.S. airstrikes have enabled the Kurdish Peshmerga and the Iraqi forces to push back on the Islamic State. They have, the Iraqi government has been formed. We're, I'm sure, going to have a conversation about that. The Kurds play a major role in that. Critical challenges lie in front of us as we attempt to degrade and destroy the Islamic State. How to deal with the displacement of more than 1.7 million people and the trauma caused by thousands of killings, including beheadings that we've all seen on the television. Further support from the United States and some of its allies depends on the Iraqi government formation that I just mentioned. This will be important for the Iraqi government to take the lead in countering terrorist group and addressing the underlying political, security, economic, social dynamics that have allowed the Islamic State to make the progress that it has. Kurdistan Regional Government, for one, has given Iraqi Prime Minister Abadi 90 days to meet some specific demands that we would like to explore with you again here this morning. The main point here is the Kurds in Iraq play a key role. So we are very pleased to be able to have this conversation. We will be asking what's next in Iraqi's political process, what will be the KRG's role in a stepped-up campaign against the Islamic State, how is the Kurdish leadership's thinking evolving on independence, which we had a conversation about last time you all were here, and we look forward to pursuing that. This we're going to ask Manal Omar, who is the acting vice president for the Middle East and Africa, to set the stage, kind of an overview of the region as well as our work there. We will then have remarks by both Dr. Hussein and Minister Bakir. From here, a couple of questions to get us started, and I'm looking forward very much to your questions to them. So you can guide this conversation in directions that you would like. So, Manal, would you like to begin?
Thank you, Ambassador Taylor, and welcome, Dr. Hussein, Minister Bakir, Ambassador Falah, distinguished guests, and our viewers in the webcast. As Ambassador Taylor already said, this is indeed a very timely conversation. And I, for one, follow Iraq very closely. I've been working in Iraq since 1998, and when I go to sleep, it's one situation, and when I wake up, it's a completely another. So we're very fortunate to have this insight and really be able to understand, because in our opinion, it's not only about Iraq. What we've seen over and over is that what's happening in Iraq has great influence on what's happening at the region at large. More specifically, we see that the conflicts with Syria and the conflicts are beginning to merge, and the threat goes as far as Yemen and all across the region, and I would even argue is beginning to take a real global scale. So having that opportunity to really look in and having the insight that we'll have from our speakers is something that we feel very fortunate of. At the same time, it's an ability to pause and to be grateful for the relationship that we've had with many of our partners in Iraq. One of the things that USIP takes great pride in is that we've been in Iraq since 2003 with a permanent presence in Baghdad since 2004. We've been working with our partners and organizations that include the government, as well as civil society across the country, including the Kurdish regional government. And we take pride in the fact that we've never left. USIP's core mission in Iraq is to strengthen local capacities to prevent, manage, and resolve conflicts peacefully. And that's not always easy. And one of the things that we found is that, particularly in times of violence, the first reaction is often to forget the tools of nonviolent means that are available to build peace. Our strategy has always been to build relationships and partners with people on the ground, knowing very well that they already have the solutions, but it's often the resources and tools that are needed to be able to implement them. We are in particular proud of our relationships and partners in the Kurdish regional government. We have partnered with the KRG Ministry of Education on civic education. We've also partnered with the Ministry of Religious Affairs on training the religious ulama, the scholars, on the role of religious leaders in peace building. And we've also worked with the Judicial Council of Kurdistan, coordinating with the High Judicial Council in Baghdad. We're very proud of the fact that we were early on supporting Dahuk University with starting a peace-building program, which is actually now today evolved into a master's program. And at the same time, we continue to always support local civil society organizations in the Kurdish region in order to be able to continue the mission of peace-building. Our reality show, Salam Shabab, which we're very proud of, which brought youth from all across the region, was based in Erbil, and we really appreciated the diversity of having the ambassadors of peace all across the region being able to travel to the north. It's very difficult in this context of Iraq to talk about progress. But we really believe in having such a long extent in Iraq, we have seen progress in terms of peace building, particularly in terms of the commitment on the ground. When many organizations felt that it was time to pull out of Iraq, USIP realized that our mission, peace building, and continuing to work on nonviolent means of conflict resolution was more important than ever. We actually decided to maintain and build up our programs with a special emphasis on building local capacity. We realized very early on that any success in Iraq would be a success for the region at large. The reality is that also any challenge to Iraq is proving to be a real challenge at the region. And I think today, more than ever, we've seen how true this is going to be. Iraq's politics and their security challenges posed by the armed advancements of the self-proclaimed so-called Islamic State, Daesh, challenge the peace builders. I personally have decided to take the lead from the region, and more recently from the French government, in rejecting the term Islamic State and calling them Daesh to de-link any of the rhetoric and claims that they have. Because in reality, this ideological threat has really turned Iraq into turmoil, and as well as the region, and the humanitarian crisis that we've seen, with 1.7 million people displaced and a huge conflict that has arisen across the region, is something that everyone must come together in order to battle. As Iraq and the international community are gearing up to roll back Daesh, the reality is that we need to put in place not only a short-term solution to dealing with this particular group, but a long-term strategy with intensive efforts for communities to heal and restore some form of normalcy in order to move forward. The massive human displacement is bringing increasing strains that could have long-lasting negative effects. I would like to stress again here that Iraq has always been a priority for USIP, and it will remain so. We believe that we can work together even more to scale up successful efforts on dialogue and reconciliation to tackle Iraq's challenges. So even as we plan to deal with the current challenge, we continue to have a long-term vision of continuous work and our role in Iraq for many years to come. Our work on bridging relations between communities, whether it's in the justice security sector or among civil society organizations, from Baghdad to Basra, Karbala and Kirkuk, including our dialogue initiatives amongst the tribes in Mahmudiyah and in the Nineveh Plain, working on minorities for several years, are all experiences that we believe will be useful in addressing current and future challenges. Not only for Iraq, but we believe the Iraq experience, in particular the knowledge that has grown from civil society, will be very useful for other countries that are facing similar threats. Dr. Hussein, Minister Bakir, Ambassador Falah, as Iraq and the Kurdish regional government continue to tackle the current challenges, the U.S. Institute of Peace hopes that you will continue to see us as a reliable partner and will call on us for any support. Thank you.
Thank you, Manal. Thank you very much. Great. She has also, Manal, in addition to setting the stage, has answered the question, what do we call ISIL, ISIS, Islamic State? And Manal has said it's Daesh. So we will adopt that. I think this is good. Let me invite Dr. Hussein and Minister Bakir to the stage, and they will have opening statements, a couple of questions, and then we will turn to you for questions. So please. Podium? Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for hosting us. I'm glad to be here. I see many friends here, including my good friend, Ambassador Falah. The first question usually is, why are we here once again in Washington? It is part of our plan. We have planned to be here 3-4 times in a year. But this time is different. This time is different because we have got a new government in Baghdad, so there is a change in Baghdad. Then the first question will be, what does it mean, this change? What does it mean for Iraq? What does it mean for Kurdistan? What does it mean for neighboring countries? And also for the relationship with Washington. There is also a big change. ISIS, or ISIL, occupied 1/3 of the country, 1/3 of the territory of Iraq. And it started in the beginning of August, an attack on Kurdistan region. So this is also a change. First, having 1/3 of the country under occupation, and second, Kurdistan being attacked. The third change, which is also big, the United States policy towards Iraq. It's well known that with the new administration, I mean, when Obama started, there wasn't Iraqi policy, or if there was a policy, it was a policy of being far away from Iraq or withdraw from Iraq. Now, the situation is different. The American planes are engaged in fighting against ISIS in Iraq. And the relationship between Washington and Baghdad and Washington and Erbil is different than even a few months ago. So, depending on these issues, depending on these topics, how are we going to see the future of the country? Because that's the question. What is next? I mean, the future of Iraq, the future relationship between Iraq and Kurdistan, the future relationship between Baghdad and Washington, and Erbil and Washington. We started negotiation with various political parties in Baghdad. And from the beginning we said, because of the change in Baghdad, change in the leadership, we want to be part of this new process, to rebuild the political process. Mr. Maliki hijacked the political process, and the political parties in Iraq, they got it back now. But then the main question for us is, how are we going to build this new process? Are we going to follow the old path? Then, of course, if we will all follow the old path, we will reach the same results. And we know that the new Prime Minister, Mr. Abadi, is facing huge problems in Iraq. First, as I said, 1/3 of the Iraqi territory is under occupation of the terrorists. So how is he going to rebuild his army? About 10 divisions of the Iraqi army has been collapsed. Many people, they are talking about 6 has been collapsed in Mosul and around Mosul. That's right. But about 4 divisions also has been collapsed during the fight in Anbar. I mean, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, 6 months ago, when ISIS started there the fight and Iraqi army collapsed. In reality, we must start once again building or rebuilding a new army in Iraq. How are we going to build that? And what about now? Who is taking care of the security in Baghdad? The security in Baghdad now is in the hands of the party militias. That's also part of the reality. Is it possible for party militias to fight and liberate the Sunni areas? This is also a question for us. I think the answer is clear. It will be difficult. It will be difficult. So who is fighting ISIS in Mosul and around Mosul? The only forces, the only main force which is fighting ISIS there is the Kurdish Peshmerga. This is also part of the reality. But there are sometimes cooperation between some units from Iraqi army and Kurdish Peshmerga. Of course, after a long time, after a long conflict between Baghdad and Erbil, working together, this gives also hope to many people and to the political leadership in Baghdad so that we can start a new page. But the problem in Iraq is so deep. The conflict in Iraq is so wide and so complicated. Is it possible for the new government to deal with it? Or we must be all partner in finding solution. We are planning to be partner. We are planning to be partner in finding solution for the problems that facing Iraq. But at the same time, we have got many conflict areas with the same government in Baghdad. How are they going to deal with these conflicts? Cutting the budget of the region since January this year, we didn't receive our budget. Is it possible for the new government to restart and take the initiative to pay the budget? This is one of the problems. The other main problem has to do with the disputed areas. Maliki's government left Article 140, which has to do with disputed area. It's a kind of roadmap for solving the problem of disputed areas. He ignored that article. The new government is supposed to implement that article. It is the task of the government to implement it according to the Constitution. Are they going to do that? And if they will do it, when are they going to do it? What about oil and gas issue and revenue sharing? These are some problems that we have with Baghdad. And one of the main problems still and exists has to do with the Peshmerga forces. Baghdad didn't want to recognize Peshmerga forces in the past, of course, although it was once again part of the constitution, as part of the security system in Iraq, and to be paid by Baghdad. And they ignored to pay purchasing weapons for Peshmerga forces. So one of the reasons why in the first days of the fighting, when the fighting started against ISIS, Peshmerga forces in the beginning, they were obliged to reorganize themselves and defend themselves because of shortages in weapons and munition. So, do we expect from the current government in Baghdad that they are going to deal with Peshmerga in a different way? Now, outside world is helping the Peshmerga. The United States is helping the Peshmerga. Germany is helping the Peshmerga forces. Many other European countries, France is helping the Peshmerga forces. It will be strange that outside world is supporting Peshmerga forces and Iraqi government ignores Peshmerga forces. This will be strange. But this is an issue. It must be discussed. These are some problems that the Iraqi government and we are facing nowadays in Kurdistan. The question is about future. How are we going to establish first our relationship with Baghdad? Second, the relationship of Iraq with the outside world. As far as our relationship with Baghdad, I think we must face the reality. The new reality, once again, is that Iraq has been divided not because of the Kurds, but Iraq was divided because of the terrorist occupation, terrorist of Daesh, when they controlled 1/3 of the country. But Iraq has been also divided because of the bad policy of Prime Minister Maliki. Because Maliki, at the end, he was ruling the country alone. He ignored his partners. So that means if we want to establish a new Iraq, we must go back to partnership. If we want to keep the unity of Iraq, then it is up to Baghdad to behave in the correct way and according to the constitution of Iraq. That means to establish federal structures in Iraq. Without having federal structures in Iraq, the unity of Iraq will not be there. And by the way, when we are talking about federal structures, we are talking about the constitution, in fact. We are not violating the Iraqi constitution. So to keep the unity of Iraq once again, we need federal structure. Why do we need federal structure? It will be difficult after what happened in Iraq, especially between the Sunnis and Shia, to bring these two communities together in one Iraq. In other words, the solution is if the Sunni will have their own area and the Shia will have their own area, and our right has been recognized in the Constitution as a federal region, then we can have Baghdad for all of us. That is the way to keep Iraq and the unity of Iraq. Otherwise, what does it mean unity of Iraq if the Sunnis, they don't feel that they have been represented in Baghdad, and the Kurds, they feel they have been ignored in Baghdad or discriminated in Baghdad, and the Shia wants to control Iraq. Or some Sunnis wants to come back to the old style to control Iraq once again and to rule Iraq. This will not happen. The Kurds will not accept that anymore. The Sunni cannot re-control Iraq alone, and the Shia, they cannot rule Iraq alone. So the way to have the unity of Iraq is partnership, but partnership is not enough. We need a structure for partnership. Partnership has not to do with having some Sunni faces or Kurdish faces or Shia faces in the government in Iraq. We had it. During Maliki, we had it. Partnership has to do with the balance of power on the ground. And balance of the power on the ground, each group must have its own administration's right, and its own region. I think Iraq will be more safer and more united if we will talk about sharing the wealth and power between center and periphery. Iraq will be better united if we will talk about decentralization of the security. Nowadays, it is difficult, as I mentioned. It is difficult for Shia party militias to fight in Sunni areas. It will be difficult for the Kurds to go to the Arab areas and to fight there. It will be difficult for the Sunni units, if there are some Sunni units, to go to the Shia areas. So the way is to have this federal structure. And federal structure in Iraq, it doesn't mean only sharing the power, but distributing the power and the wealth between the center and periphery, but also the security must be distributed. It will be difficult to have one security forces. We must have various security forces. If we will go this direction, then perhaps we will have a united Iraq, but at the same time, united because the people of these areas will agree about that. So there must be an agreement to be united. If not, I think we must prepare ourselves for a different future of Iraq, and how it will be, I don't know, but it will be difficult then to talk about unity in Iraq while the Kurds will be ignored, the Sunni will be marginalized, the Shia will be only in Baghdad and around Baghdad in the south. Unity of Iraq has to do with that every Iraqi and these three main communities must feel that they are part of the political process, part of the decision-making process, part of the implementing the decision, and each has got its own identity, but its also own geography inside Iraq. Thank you very much.
Minister, you have said you're going to decide whether to speak from here or there, and your decision is? Please. Good.
Well, good morning. I would like to start by thanking USIP for hosting us here and also for your attendance. Building upon what Dr. Hussein has said, we are here to communicate a number of messages to the officials in the American administration, to our friends on the Capitol Hill, our friends in the think tank and the media outlets about the situation on the ground in Kurdistan. And of course, the title of this session, Iraq, What's Next, is important because people are following the challenges we're facing, and also people want to know what will happen within Iraq and what will happen in Kurdistan in dealing with the challenges we are facing. I'd like to talk about three main areas: political, security, and humanitarian. In the political sphere, there has been some progress with the decision that was made to join the government formation process in Baghdad. Although the leadership in Kurdistan was not in favor of joining the administration or the government in Baghdad, due to the fact that the negotiation process that took place was not an encouraging one. But we deemed it necessary that we have to do something in order to bring about the change for the sake of improving at a later stage. Otherwise, changing faces would not be enough for us to see a real change in the structure and also in the path of the government. The second is the security situation. We have faced some serious challenges in June, but later in August, when the immediate attack of the ISIS terrorists came and approached Kurdistan region. Therefore, last time when we were here in Washington, end of June and beginning of July, we were communicating the message that we need assistance, military assistance and support in order to be ready for ISIS. We knew that we were under threat. But unfortunately, things did not move fast enough for us to be ready for that security challenge, and we have faced difficulties. As a result, and I will go to the third point, which is humanitarian, we have faced a humanitarian catastrophe, and especially in the areas of Sinjar, Nineveh Plain, and south of Erbil. In all of Iraq, there is 1.8 million IDPs and refugees. Indeed, 1.5 of them are in Kurdistan region. So that includes 250,000 Syrian refugees, and the rest are IDPs from the rest of Iraq. Only this year, the KRG has hosted or received 850,000 of them in 3 waves. The first wave was in March after the events in Anbar province. The second wave was in June after the fall of Mosul and then the other provinces. And the third wave was in August. That has been a real challenge for us, not only in providing humanitarian assistance for people, that KRG itself had real challenges of running the administration. Because it's truly a challenge for a government to be at war with the ISIS terrorists and to care for 1.5 million IDPs and refugees and not to have paid the salaries of Peshmergas who are in the battlefront. We are 3 months behind in paying the salaries of Peshmergas and the civil servants. Therefore, we commend the resilience of the Kurdish government and Kurdish people in being able to face all these challenges while the people's expectations are higher than before. Therefore, we are here in order to ask for support in terms of helping us to help those vulnerable people, especially the Yazidis, the Christians, the Shabak, the Faili, and all the other displaced people who, in addition being traumatized and shocked at the barbarity and the brutality of these terrorists, they are facing challenges of death. Because we know that thousands of people were stranded on Mount Sinjar, and others were without any shelter and food. So true that the UN and its agencies are working with the KRG in order to provide assistance, but it's not enough. Therefore, we call upon the international community to come forward and provide assistance so that we can meet their expectations. Over 700 schools in Kurdistan and mainly in Duhok province are occupied by IDPs. So the displaced people cannot be asked to leave the schools. School year has started, so this has affected the community directly. The population of Duhok have not been able to send their children to school. We need to build 26 refugee camps and IDP camps in Kurdistan. We have to prepare ourselves for winter. Yes, certain people would be able to go back to their villages after they have been liberated. But we have to make sure that there are proper defensive lines and consolidated so that these people once again would not face displacement. Another issue that we would like to draw the attention of the international community, the attempt at genocide, and especially against the Yazidis and the Christians. Because the messages and the policy of the terrorists were very clear. Either convert, pay, or you will be dead, or pay or leave and debt. So that concept of medieval ages to be implemented and put in place in 21st century is a bit strange. Therefore, we needed international support in order to address the challenge that we're facing. The KRG is doing whatever it can in order to meet their expectations and do whatever we can to provide the assistance that is needed. But no, it's not an easy challenge. Therefore, we are expecting, before the international community, the Iraqi federal government to come forward. They can play a role in helping financing some of these activities, in helping providing foodstuff, because most of the displaced people are Iraqi families. Iraqi families are entitled to receive their food share from the public distribution system. It's not a favor because every Iraqi family is entitled to receive that. So the federal government in Baghdad, through the Ministry of Trade, they can provide that through the mechanism. And also, most of these people who are government employees or pensioners, they can also receive their salaries. At least it would help people to get something, to alleviate the burden on the KRG, which itself is facing deficit and has tried to borrow money from local and foreign companies in order to run the administration. Therefore, the challenges ahead of us are huge. If we were to go towards a better future in Iraq and Kurdistan region, then we have to look for a genuine partnership that would ensure a better future for all of us. We talked about federal structure, but federalism was there set and stipulated in the Constitution, but indeed it has been emptied from its content. It was not implemented, it was not adhered to, and the only group that was mentioning it was the Kurdistan region and the officials in Kurdistan. Therefore, we can't have more of the same of what we had in the last 8 years. Either to bring about a meaningful change that would give hope for the improvement of the situation, or we have to think about a serious situation. Therefore, this time the Kurdish leadership decided conditionally to join the government in Baghdad in order to give some time for serious and real negotiation on addressing the issues with clear-cut time frame in order to be addressed, because we cannot continue, and the situation on the ground is facing the security challenges and economic challenges. Therefore, I would like to stop here by thanking you for being here and with our call on the international community to support us politically in order for Kurdistan region and the rest of Iraq to succeed in the challenges we face. Second, in terms of military support for our forces on the ground to face this challenge. And third, for the humanitarian assistance and also the sending international investigators and teams to work on the recognition of the genocide. And thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much. So if I can ask just a couple of questions at the outset while you prepare your questions, I look forward to them, and I'm sure both Dr. Hussein and Minister Bakir do as well. You've both in general terms described the purpose of your visit here. And you've described, Dr. Hussein, the differences from when you were here recently in the past. And they are, there is a new government, there has been this attack on KRG from Daesh or ISIL, and US policy has changed. Your visit here, as you've just described in some general terms, is highlighting requests from the US government. If you were to be more specific on the kinds of, you mentioned humanitarian, you mentioned military support, are there specifics that you've had conversations with on the Hill and will have in the State Department and with the White House on the kinds of both humanitarian and military support that the United States, the international community more broadly, but the United States specifically on this visit ought to consider and ought to get to you quickly?
Thank you for this question. When we were here the last time, it was June, July, and on 3rd of July we were in the White House. And then at that time we discussed the security situation in Iraq, and ISIS had already occupied Mosul and many other areas. At that time we requested United States government to help us with weapons. Now we are here, United States has sent weapons. So this is also a change, a big change. At that time we were requesting United States to help us to face ISIS threat. Now United States planes are striking ISIS bases. But still, the question here, but the question also in Kurdistan is, what is our target? Is the target to get ISIS far away from Kurdistan region? Is it the target to push ISIS once again back into Mosul? They are there, but to push them back? Or is it the target to destroy ISIS in Mosul, in Iraq, and some people here, they go further to destroy ISIS bases also in Syria? If this is the question, who is going to fight ISIS on the ground? Who can do that? Is it possible to destroy ISIS only by airstrike? Or you must have combination of both? If you will have combination of both, and I guess that must be the way, otherwise you cannot destroy ISIS only by airstrike, then the next question, we know the answer, but the question here, who is going to fight? And where are the fighters? Which force is going to be your partner on the ground? I know we are talking about Iraqi forces. There are some units of Iraqi army which can help, but the reality is that the main force on the ground, they are the Peshmerga force, the Kurds. The Kurds, they are fighting ISIS for many reasons. Some reasons has to do with principles, with their values, but ISIS is also a threat for Kurdistan. And they attacked Kurdistan. So the Kurds are ready to fight ISIS everywhere. And we think that Kurdistan will stay under threat if ISIS will stay in Mosul. In other words, the target for the time being must be Mosul. But to enter Mosul, you need different kinds of weapons. You need different kinds of weapons to enter Mosul. So we are here to talk about that. And we already started discussion to ask the American that your partner on the ground are ready to continue this fight. And by the way, the last days we liberated many areas and we are not far away from Mosul. But to enter the city, it needs, once again, as I said, different kinds of weapons. So we requested, once again, this. We talked about that with various officials, and we are going to continue this discussion here. Of course, if the target will be to destroy ISIS on the other side of the border, Syria, that's a different issue, and it needs different discussion.
Dr. Hussein, if I could just ask, you said different kinds of weapons in order to push into Mosul. Are you being specific with your U.S. government?
Different kinds of weapons, you need tanks, you need helicopters, you need different kinds of artillery. You need, there are special cars for cleaning the mines, because, so you need different kinds of weapons.
Heavier
the weapons that we have, we think that with these weapons it's not enough to enter the city of Mosul.
Minister Bakir, you mentioned on this topic that some countries have been providing some weapons. I understand it's been light weapons, and the proposal here is for heavier weapons. It's for tanks, it's for helicopters, it's for artillery. Is there a prospect from other countries that you've had conversations with, Europeans, that could also provide this?
Well, indeed, we are very pleased at the level of support and solidarity that was shown to Kurdistan, and we believe the support to Kurdistan was for the values that we stand for democracy, for freedom, for human rights, for rule of law, for what we have built in Kurdistan. Therefore, we were very pleased to see all that support around the world. Yes, some European countries have provided weapons, are light to mid weapons, but we are asking for heavy weapons, and it's supposed to be on their way. But what we want is to have weapons, heavy weapons, which are good for offensive purposes or not defensive purposes, because we cannot defeat ISIS unless we move up against them and make advances. Therefore, this is the nature. And second, we also want to get some assistance from the United States, but also other countries around the world, to help us for an international conference on humanitarian assistance, because this is a major issue that we're facing. The refugees in Syria are still there, and there is no prospect for a solution in Syria. The IDPs and the rest of Iraq are there. Yes, we would be able to help those who are in the Nineveh plain and other areas to go back, but what about the rest? In Mosul, in Anbar, in Diyala provinces. Therefore, this is a huge challenge on us. A humanitarian assistance conference to be hosted by KRG and the UN agencies in order to look at their needs, to make a proper assessment and how to meet them, especially as we are approaching the winter, and that may go into the next year.
Dr. Hussein, one other question which you've already addressed to some degree. The Peshmerga can be the ground forces. President Obama has made it very clear that he, at this point, has no intention of sending U.S. ground forces in a combat role. You've suggested that the Peshmerga are prepared to do that, to provide that component of the attack, of the pushback, of the attempt, of the effort to destroy, degrade and destroy Daesh. There have been voices in Iraq who have reinforced that, who have said, we don't want American forces on the ground in Iraq. What's your sense of that, and what's your sense of the view in Baghdad of American forces and the willingness of the Peshmerga to be the ground forces?
There are some people in Iraq, they don't want American forces for ideological reason. We are not from that category. It is up to the American to decide. If they will send their forces, it is up to them. But of course, on the agreement with the Iraqi government, because at the end, when you send forces to another country, you need an agreement. But in principle, when the American forces were in Iraq and the American government decided to withdraw, my president and Kurdish leadership made it clear. The security situation in Iraq was not yet there to be protected by Iraqi security itself, although Prime Minister Maliki at that time, he went on the TV and he announced that everything was under control and the security situation was good in Iraq, but we had seen it. Anyhow, I think as far as the fight against ISIS, we said it. The Kurdish forces, they are ready to do it. Not because the Americans are asking us. We are doing that on the basis of our principle. We are doing that because we are defending our people. We are defending our country. We are defending our principles. But our values has to do also with Western values. We are talking about democracy. We are defending human rights. We are defending women's rights. I mean, all these principles, they are part of our policy. Our policy is based on these principles, while ISIS, in principle, they are against all these ideas. So we are fighting in the first place for our people, but at the same time we are fighting for the free world, because ISIS is an international organization. There are thousands of Islamist terrorists. They came from Western countries. And they are fighters. They are fighting there. The question is, what are they doing when they will finish the fight there? Of course, they will be a threat to the security in other parts of the world. So our fight, indirectly, is a fight also for other societies. But we are ready to do it on the ground. We are ready to do it on the ground, and that's why we made it clear that at this moment, we don't need other armies or American boots on the ground. That was clear. But if the American government will decide one day to send army units to that area, of course, it depends on the American policy, but also on an agreement with the Iraqi government.
Very good. So we have now the opportunity for you to ask questions, and there's a question right here. So if you will wait for the mic, state your name and your question.
Thank you. Rafael from the Brazilian Embassy. Could you comment on the participation of Iran helping the Iraqi forces? Thank you.
Dr. Hussein, you want to start with that?
In the first days of the fighting, then we are talking about beginning of August, and when ISIS terrorists reached the border of Erbil, the Iranian government sent some support, military support to Kurdistan, and we are thankful for that. So they were helpful in this fight, especially in the beginning of the fighting. And the Iranian helped also the Iraqi forces. In this case, there were, let's say, party militias to liberate Amelie. It was under siege for 2 months, and the population of that city, they were resisting for 2 months. So Kurdish forces plus, let's say, Shia party forces and the Iranian and the American, they helped all together to liberate that area. The American, of course, they used their airstrike in that area, but the Peshmerga forces and the Shia forces, they were together in the fight, and they liberated the people there.
Dr. Hussein, if I can just elaborate on it, good question. So was there coordination then to coordinate the American airstrikes, the Peshmerga on the ground, the Iranian support? Was there Iranian, American, Kurdish, Iraqi coordination?
On the ground, of course, there was coordination between the Shia forces and the Peshmerga forces. This was, of course, otherwise you cannot advance and fight that terrorist. As far as the coordination between the American planes, usually it is a coordination between Peshmerga forces and the American.
So the coordination between the Americans and the Iranians was through the Peshmerga?
It was not coordination between American and Iranian. It was coordination between Peshmerga and
I understand.
And also we have some American advisors on the ground with us, so this has been announced. Therefore, when we talked about American troops, in fact, we have said it. This is our fight. It's our responsibility to do it. It has a regional dimension as well as an international dimension. But locally, it's our responsibility as Kurds and Kurdistanis, as well as Iraqis. But then it goes to Syria and beyond that, it has to become a regional and international. But the Americans have announced that they have sent some experts and advisors to be with us on the ground in order to assess the situation and to see what kind of military support and assistance to be provided for our forces.
Very good. Sir.
My name is Yerevan Saeed. I work for a Roda News agency. I have two questions for the guests. One of them is, how optimistic are you about the Iraqi government to implement your demands within 3 months, while the Kurds have, given over a century of deadline to different Iraqi, governments to implement your demands? And secondly, there are reports that Baghdad is given a hard time for the weapons to go to Kurdistan. How is Baghdad in facilitating these weapons from European countries and other countries to KRG? Thanks.
As far as Minister Bakir is clearly deferring this one to you.
Well, I may interfere, but I will.
As far as the opportunity, of course, we hope that we will succeed. And I'm talking about we. Because at the end, the Iraqi government means all political parties. So we are working to reach success. But at the same time, we must be realistic. Success has to do with being committed to, as I said, to the Constitution, but also to many agreements which had been signed in the past. And if there will be positive steps in Baghdad, the direction of Kurdistan, then of course we will continue supporting the government. And we put some conditions, and we hope that within 3 months we will receive some positive signals and positive steps in implementing the agreements which we had. And one of them has to do with, let's say, deciding when Iraqi government is going to have census, and at the end to have a referendum in disputed areas. One of them, which I think now they are discussing it, to pay the budget of Kurdistan. Other issue has to do with the Peshmerga forces, the payment for Peshmerga forces, weapon for Peshmerga forces. So we hope that positive steps will be taken so that we can continue building a new political process. As far as receiving weapons, Mr. Maliki, when he was Prime Minister until last day, he created some problems for us. He obliged the planes, especially planes which brought weapons from various countries, to go first to Baghdad, just for a few hours, and then flying to Erbil. During that period, we had telephone calls with Mr. Abadi. He was not yet Prime Minister. He promised that he would solve this problem. I don't know if these days it has been solved, but he promised that it will be solved.
Indeed, we are dealing with the situation in Iraq. It's all based on lack of trust and unfulfilled promises. It's not about being optimist or pessimist, it's about being realist. If we want to have a better future, a future that can be sustained, a future that can ensure partnership, power sharing and prosperity, then we have to be realistic. We're not going to go back to the old structure. As we said last time, and we reiterated, that we are not going to go back to the Iraq of pre-Mosul era. We in Kurdistan Regional Government, we ask for more political power, more economic power, and more sovereignty, including control over our airspace. Not only military air flights, humanitarian air flights, as well as visitors. Dignitaries who wanted to visit Kurdistan, they were obliged to go and land in Baghdad to meet with Iraqi officials and then to come. Otherwise, they would not be allowed to visit Kurdistan. Just imagine, like here, for people who do not want to come to Washington, if they go to another state, to say, no, you have to go to Washington, land in Washington, meet some people, and then go to the other states. We can't have it like this. Therefore, we have to open a new page, a page based on trust, based on understanding, and also reading the new realities on the ground. Otherwise, we will not succeed.
Thank you, Minister. We have two questions here. One would do on the, there are, good.
My name is Connie Zulam. I'm with the American Kurdish Information Network. Physically, Scotland is thousands of kilometers away from Kurdistan. But politically, they face an identical problem, the problem of self-rule, the desire to be free. First, do you support the Yes campaign or Better Together campaign? Two, how long will it take for the Arab ruling circles in Baghdad to do what David Cameron did, to allow a referendum on the issue?
Question on the Scottish...
Neither Iraq is Great Britain nor Scotland is there. So there are differences. But at the end, we are talking about the right of self-determination. The Kurds has the right of self-determination. When they will exercise that right, that has to do with them. So that must be clear. I mean, the Kurds has got that right, and they will exercise it one day. But it's up to Kurdish people to decide when and how. It has also to do with the last chance which has been given to Baghdad. We hope that Baghdad can make it, Baghdad can be changed. If Baghdad will stay as it was, then of course the situation will be different. But the right of self-determination is It's our right, and when we will exercise that, when the Kurdish people will exercise that, that has to do with them, not somebody else will decide for them.
History has shown that unity cannot be imposed. It has to be voluntary. Of course, in democratic societies and civilized societies, it's much easier to deal with than our part of the world, which has long and deep traditions of hatred, of violence, and of dictatorship. So therefore, it needs time. We cannot compare the two situations. But for us, of course, it's a sentimental issue. It's a sensational for us to, we can't be against the will of other nations when they aspire to independence. We can't be, because we are aspiring for our own independence. Therefore, but it's for the people of Scotland, for the people of the United Kingdom to decide, but peacefully, and I believe they are civilized people. When you look at it, when they say better together, it tells you how civilized these people are. They're not saying no as such. They're saying if we stay together, it is better. But for us, I believe it is better to separate from each other.
Yes, sir.
Phil Schrafer, no affiliation, but I did attend a conference earlier this week by SAIS, the School of Advanced International Studies. I got an understanding of several things and just want to run that by the speakers today. Number one, that the government of Baghdad is democratic for Shias, but not for Sunnis. It has not been inclusive of the Sunnis, and ISIS is largely a reflection of that 80% of the land occupied by ISIS in Iraq is actually occupied by disgruntled Sunnis who are supporting ISIS, and that much of the military leadership of ISIS is former special forces officers from the Iraqi army.
What was the question?
State your question specifically.
What was that question?
Do you accept this, or do you disagree with it? I guess that's my question.
That the makeup of the ISIS military is former Sunni, members of the Sunni that were in the Iraqi army.
Right, and 80% of the land is
I don't know if 80%, to be honest, it's difficult to have the percentage. But it is well known that many officers of the former regime of Saddam Hussein, they joined ISIS, and they are playing an important role. But as I said, ISIS is an international organization. They have got people from around the world, but also Arabs from North Africa, Gulf countries. So it is an ideological organization. As far as democracy for Shia and not for Sunni, I don't think we have got yet a real democracy in Iraq. So it is neither for Shia nor for Sunni nor for Kurd. We hope that one day we will have a democratic system in Iraq. You see, during my introduction, I didn't talk about democracy. I talked about federal structure, because it will be difficult now to have a democratic system in Iraq. Election is part of democracy. It's not, I mean, for a democratic system you need a lot. Election can be the basis for a democratic system, but for a democratic system you need democratic elite, you need democratic parties, you need people who believe in democracy, and I am afraid that it will be difficult to find a lot of people there in Iraq who believes in democracy, a real democracy. So we need to first to divide the power among the population. So that's why I talked about federal structure, so that they can develop within their own community their system, and at the end they can cooperate together, and perhaps that will create a kind of margin of freedom and democratic process. But to have a democratic system in Iraq, we must go a long, long way. It's not yet there.
Well, Iraq is in a transitional phase. If you, just going back to the previous question, there were a number of prime ministers of Great Britain who were from Scotland. Okay? So this is where we will have real democracy, when people in Iraq will be treated as equal partners, not based on their religion, sect, or nationality. Iraq is a binational, multicultural, multi-ethnic society. That fact has to be considered. In transitional phase, you have to prepare the ground and you have to educate the people. It may need generations in order to get there.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, all the way here, and then down here. Yes.
My name is Ali Ahmed. I'm working for Al-Hurra TV. My question is, the Kurds gave Prime Minister Abadi 90 days to make progress in terms of solving problems between Baghdad and Erbil. If the 90 days is over, what's your position then?
It depends what happens in the coming 90 days. Are we, as I mentioned, are we going to have positive steps towards solving main issues, or the government in Baghdad will ignore all these issues? If will not happen, then of course the Kurds has got many options. But one of them is to go back to our people and to ask our people, what's the next step? But we hope that we can make it. We are serious as far as being partner of Mr. Abadi. We want to support him. We are working with him. It is not it is not fair to leave it only to Mr. Abadi. When we are talking positive step, that means we are going to work together to reach that positive step. So the first project for us is to reestablish the right path in the political process in Baghdad.
Also, Iraq has got other problems, not only between Erbil and Baghdad. There are some Iraqi problems that have to be addressed in order to have a better future for the country. Sunnis have got problems, Kurds have problems, some Shia groups have got problems. Therefore, the previous government failed because it did not meet the expectations of the communities. If we are to solve all these problems, then we need serious participation among all the partners to help move Iraq forward at this stage. But we are at the first few days of the government formation, therefore we have a long path until we get to the 90 days.
Yes, sir.
My name is Wali Mutazamil. I recall as early as 2007 and 2008, we have community practitioners in the area of community psychology was part of a coalition providing mental health services for those who have been suffered from the area of trauma and other long-term mental health experiences. And my question is, now and moving forward, what type of treatment is being provided for those who are currently suffering from trauma, and what type of plan is on the ground in treating those who are suffering from mental health experiences? Thank you.
Well, indeed, we are overstretching our infrastructure and we do need help. That's why we have been calling upon the international community and especially the international NGOs to come and be on the ground with us, because it's beyond the capacity of the KRG. 1.5 million compared with 5.5 million, the population of Kurdistan, it means 20% of our population have increased overnight. So therefore, this is a huge burden on us, and we don't have that many resources nor the capacity to deal with them. But in each family of the IDPs and refugees, there is a story and there are problems to deal with. Therefore, it's huge, especially the women, the children, the elderly, those who suffer from chronic diseases. These are all people who need close attention. And that's why we say we need assistance, we need support from different organizations around the world.
Yes, sir.
My name is İhsan Gündüz, George Mason University. How is Turkey's unwillingness to cooperate with international coalition going to affect the KRG and Turkey's relations? Thank you.
You see, I see a good friend of mine from Turkish ambassador there. It is not up to us to answer a question on behalf of Turkey. So you can raise this question with Turkey itself or Turkish officials. Yeah.
Well said, sir. There's a mic coming.
As a follow-up question, having a feasible Sunni region under the federal structure you're describing, can Turkey play a role?
At the end, the population of Iraq, they must decide about how they are going to organize their life and how they want to live together. But it is well known, Turkish government has got good relationship with Sunni leaders. And I think Turkey is still supporting some Sunni leaders and Sunni organizations. I don't know if they are pushing Sunni leaders to have their federal structure. But nowadays, many Sunni leaders, I mean, if you compare it with the past, they are talking about federal region, while in the past they were not talking, they were very much against. I'm talking about many Sunni leaders. There are Sunni organizations which are against federal structure, and still they think federalism will lead to divide Iraq. But there are some Sunni leaders who are saying the solution for Iraq at the end is to have a region for Sunni and to have a region for Shia and of course Kurdistan, and then Baghdad will be the capital of the country.
Well, the events in Iraq and in the Middle East are affected by the Shia-Sunni power struggle, whether we like it or not. We hope that one day will come that we don't talk about such issues, but today is a reality, and all the neighbors of Iraq have got their own agendas and objective they want to achieve in Iraq. But at the end of the day, for Iraq to succeed, decisions of Iraq have to be made in Baghdad, within Iraq, by the Iraqis, otherwise there would be no future for the country.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm John Dixon with the Global Peace Foundation, and I want to really appreciate the Institute for Peace for doing this and our visitors from Kurdistan. We've met I've been a few times there, and I just think what you're doing is really important because Americans really don't understand what is Kurdistan and the Kurdish people, and that if they did, a lot of this would be taken care of. So I just want to applaud you for taking the time to come here and to do what you're doing, because it's just the information that's been missing, and people just don't get it. And as they get to understand your situation and our fantastic friends in the Middle East, all of this will be, I think, a no-brainer for support. I was curious also about the Kurdish communities outside of Kurdistan around in the region, and if there's communication and how many of the refugees are Kurdish as opposed to from other, from coming in from Syria and from Iraq and other places?
Indeed, for Kurds, we have at 3 different stages. Back in 1991, after the Kurdish uprising, we told thank you to America. After 2003, we were the only group in Iraq publicly told America thank you. And this time we are here to tell the American people and the American administration thank you for what you have done. As for the Kurdish diaspora and the people in Kurdistan, we're proud that we were united against the threat of the terrorists of ISIS. And we have opened the door of Kurdistan, and we have this open door policy to receive all the refugees and IDPs without asking who is a Kurd, who is non-Kurd, because Kurdistan would remain the land of tolerance, peaceful coexistence, because we believe in the rights of others as much as we believe in our own rights. We were refugees one day. We know how painful it is to be a refugee and displaced. Therefore, the majority of the IDPs who are in Kurdistan are Arabs, Sunnis, some Shias, some Christians, Yazidis. They belong to different ethnicities and religions, but Kurdistan is proud of that culture and it will continue to be so.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Michelle Piercy. I'm with DAI. My colleagues and I just returned from a visit to the Kurdish region last week. And
So you can tell us about this.
Thank you very much. We had a wonderful time. I just wanted to say that in addition to a culture of what you might call violence and dictatorship, our experience in Iraq and in the Kurdish region has also been that there's frequently a culture of seeing a conspiracy around every corner. The sudden departure of 4 divisions of the Iraqi army and the speed with which ISIL took terrain in the Kurdish region, I think, surprised us from afar. When we arrived, we were really struck by how quickly and how effectively they were able to take territory without a shot so much as being fired. There are many explanations for why that happened. I'm wondering if you can share your interpretation of why and how that happened so quickly. And as a very quick follow-up, perhaps if you want to discuss the departing Iraqi army generals and why or whether they ought to be held to account. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, indeed, talking about what happened in June and afterwards, we were honest and open with ourselves, with our friends in the international community. Therefore, we stated clearly that we are on the defensive, because we knew what we had. Although we went in to fill in the security vacuum, and we wanted to make sure that we provide protection to all the religious and ethnic minorities in all these areas. But the point was that we wanted help in order to have enough weapons to defend ourselves. Literally, the Peshmergas had outdated, old, and used weapons that stopped functioning even in facing ISIS. So therefore, it was unlike the situation with the Iraqi army that they have the most sophisticated and advanced weapons. They just laid down, they could not resist for even 3 hours, and they left the scene and they left the people unprotected. Therefore, in the Kurdish situation, there were a number of factors. First, the weapons, the supremacy of their weaponry. Second, the tactics that they were new for the Peshmerga, the strategy of fear and creating panic among the population, and also the long border, which was 1,035 kilometers long, and the Peshmerga were supposed to provide all that support. With the military airstrikes, the situation has changed because we had confidence that we can achieve success in facing such kind of advanced weaponry, and therefore it is such that the Peshmergas have believed in the cause. They are ready to sacrifice for the sake of their people and their land, and we have seen it day after day that we are retaking control of the territory that we lost during the first days, and we are determined to continue the path. As for the Iraqi generals, indeed, there are many questions. There has to be an investigation of why that happened, because it was a total military. The U.S. Army, the U.S. government spent a lot of time, energy, resources in building, in providing arms. We as Peshmerga forces, we have not received our fair share from these weapons that were provided, although weapons were allocated for Kurdistan region, but we did not receive it as a result of the wrong policies of the former Prime Minister Maliki that withhold all these weapons in Baghdad, and we still have not received them. But it belongs to their culture. Maybe the people who were there, they were Shias and not Sunnis, therefore they did not feel that it is their responsibility to protect the people. Some of the soldiers who were interviewed, they said, we joined the army just to get a good salary. We were not ready to die. And these are interviews with people who fled. And there were thousands of them who were there. So only in Mosul area, there were about 52,000 people in arms. So therefore, they have larger numbers than Peshmerga with better weapons, etc. And of course, the conspiracy theory is there in every corner, in every alley in that part of the world. Because if you talk to somebody, whisper in his ear, the other person says that this is conspiracy against me.
We have time, I think, for one last question, and it will be right here.
Thank you, Dakhil Shamo from Voice of America. Two questions regarding the salary, Dr. Fuad. And it looks like that the issue salary was with Maliki, Prime Minister Maliki. Why Abadi is not sending the salary, releasing the salary? Second question, I don't know why don't you talk, you want to talk about KRG-Turkey relations. A few days ago, I read a statement it was made by you saying that you were disappointed because Turkey did not help KRG when ISIS attacked Erbil. Thank you.
Yeah. As far as salary, we were in contact before even becoming a prime minister, Mr. Abadi, and he promised that he is going to solve it for the first month, and later on negotiation will start. So he is supposed to solve it now, paying for September, and then negotiation will start about the payment, but also about our oil policy. So he promised that. Talking about Turkey, the question was about Turkey itself. Otherwise, if the question was about Turkish-Kurdistani relationship, and that is, as you mentioned, we established good relationship with Turkey, and the economic interaction between the region and Turkey is wide, huge. The cultural interaction and of course the geography, all this pushed us to have good relationship with Turkey. On the contrary of the past, I'm talking about 2010. Until 2010, the relationship between the region and Turkey was very bad, tense. But since 2010, both sides, they approached each other and we established a very good relationship. So the question for us was now, when ISIS attacked us, and we approached our Turkish friends, we approached them, we had discussions with them, and we were disappointed because we heard a lot about promising that they will defend us if there will be an attack. And various times it has been repeated that your security is also affect our security. So when there will be attack on you, when your security will be threatened, that means a threat to our security also. But when the attack was there, at that time, we didn't receive enough support. And we received support from the United States and European countries. So this issue became part of the discussion in Kurdistan now. What happened? Why? I think it will be good, once again, to sit around the table. Turkish representative and representative of Kurdistan, to discuss this matter in different way and to find a solution, because at the end we will stay neighbors. We need each other. There is mutual interest for both sides, but we must repair this damage. There is damage in our relationship. Some people, they say, okay, why you are asking Turkey? But we asked them because we had this discussion with them before. In the past, there was serious discussion about the security of the area and security of the region. And we got always the promises that if we will be under threat, there will be support for us. So when it was not there, then we were disappointed. That doesn't mean the whole relationship with Turkey has been damaged. But on this issue, it has been damaged, so we need serious discussion with each other, and I think we will do that. Thank you.
Well, the first part of your question, indeed, when we talk about being part of Iraq, so it's a given fact that we have to be treated fairly. So it's not that a favor that Baghdad is doing. If we are supposed to be Iraqis, then we have to be treated as Iraqis and to get our fair share from the budget. So that's it. And the process has started. We hope that we will be able to address these issues in a good spirit so that we can solve the other problems which are complicated, more complicated than this. And for the second part of the question, we were expecting more from Turkey, while others who have never promised anything, they came forward, and Turkey did not do that.
Dr. Hussein, Minister Bakir, let me thank you very much for your open response, your frank responses, sometimes in response to several questions about difficult topics. So you've been
difficult, yes.
Some have been difficult. This is a difficult time, and you face great challenges. I was impressed with your focus on trying to make this new government in Baghdad work. I mean, that seems to be the first priority there. That there are alternatives, and you've laid out what might happen if that doesn't work. But emphasizing that, I think, was interesting. You're being specific about heavy weapons support from the United States, as well as the Peshmerga being the ground troops in this strategy for fighting against Daesh and ISIL. The donors conference that you mentioned, I think, is going to be very important. There's incredible suffering that needs to be addressed by the international community as well as Iraqis. Let me thank Manal Omar and Sarhang Hamasaeed and Miriam Sassi for putting this together. Let me thank you for joining us here today, and please join me in thanking Dr. Hussein and Minister Bakir. Thank you very much.